My name is Blake Carson. I'm 37, and until last Saturday night, I hadn't stepped foot in Houston in almost 10 years. My younger brother Mason invited me to the rooftop party he was hosting to celebrate taking over the family company. I showed up in a black suit, stood near the bar, and waited. He grabbed the mic, scanned the crowd of 400 investors and partners, then pointed straight at me. "Everyone meet my older brother Blake," he said with that smug grin, the perfect example of what happens when you turn your back on this family. The place erupted in laughter. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and sent one text to my assistant Owen: "Execute everything we talked about. Now." 11 seconds later, my father's phone started ringing off the hook. "If your own blood ever humiliated you just to look bigger in front of a crowd, drop same in the comments." I read every single one. Stick around. You're going to want to hear what happened next. 2 days earlier, I was in my office on the 38th floor in downtown Denver when Mason called out of the blue after 9 years of silence. The phone showed a Houston area code I hadn't saved. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Blake, it's Mason." His voice was polished, the same confident tone he'd perfected since college. "Listen, we're doing the big handover party for Carson Brothers this Saturday night. The PR team needs the whole family there for the campaign photos. Investors love the brother story. It'll look bad if you're missing." He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't mention the 9 years of nothing. He just laid out what the company needed from me like I was a prop they'd misplaced. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the Rockies through the glass wall. Part of me wanted to hang up, but the rest of me heard opportunity. This was the first time they'd asked me to show my face in almost a decade. If I was ever going to close the chapter for good, this was the moment. "Send me the details," I said. "I'll be there." He sounded surprised. I agreed so fast. "Great. Private rooftop hotel, Alessandra, 8 o'clock. Black tie. Thanks, man." The line went dead. I booked the Gulfstream out of Centennial Airport for that same night. While the pilots filed the flight plan, I pulled the thick manila envelope from the locked drawer in my desk. The one with the Independent Lab logo on the front. 4 months ago, I'd finally sent in the samples. 4 months ago, the results came back. I still hadn't broken the seal. I told myself I was bringing it to Houston in case I needed proof, but deep down, I knew the truth wouldn't matter to them. It only mattered to me. Owen Grant, my assistant of 7 years, walked in with the overnight bag I kept ready. He saw the envelope in my hand and raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. He already knew most of the story. "Anything special I should prepare for this trip?" he asked. "Just make sure the usual firewalls are active," I told him. "And keep the withdrawal protocols on standby." He nodded once and left. By 10 that night, the jet was climbing out over the Front Range, Houston bound. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, set the envelope on the table in front of me, and watched the city lights disappear beneath the wing. For the first time in years, I was going back to the place that had spent my entire childhood telling me I didn't belong. I wasn't the scared 17-year-old anymore, who packed one bag and walked out the front door of the River Oaks house without looking back. I was the majority silent investor who had kept Carson Brothers afloat through 3 recessions without a single thank you. Saturday night, they were going to put me on display one last time. And I was finally ready to collect what I was owed. Looking back, the day I turned 17 was the day I chose to leave. It started with a dinner that wasn't supposed to be anything special. My father, Dennis Carson, sat at the head of the table in the River Oaks dining room cutting into a steak, while Mason, then 15, talked nonstop about the new truck he was getting for his upcoming birthday. Mom Valerie passed the potatoes without looking up. Dad finally put his fork down and turned to me. "You've made it clear you're not interested in the business," he said, voice flat like he was discussing weather. "If you don't want to follow the family plan, then figure out your own." I waited for someone to argue. Riley. My sister stared at her plate. Mason smirked into his glass. Mom kept passing food that nobody needed. That was it. I stood up, walked upstairs, and packed one duffel bag. No yelling, no slammed doors. Just the quiet click of the zipper. When I came back down, Dad was already in his study. Mom stood in the foyer twisting a dish towel. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it again. I kissed her cheek, walked out the front door, and never spent another night in that house. I had $500 saved from mowing lawns and a beat-up 1998 Ford pickup I'd bought myself. That first winter, I took seasonal work as an oil field technician out in West Texas. $18 an hour, 12-hour shifts, 7 days on 7 off. The money was decent, but nights dropped to -20. I slept in the truck engine running every couple hours to keep the heater going, wrapped in a -40 sleeping bag I bought at Academy Sports. Frost coated the inside of the windows every morning. Spring came and I enrolled in community college night classes in Midland, paid for with every paycheck. By 21, I'd transferred to Houston, landed an entry-level energy analyst gig at a mid-tier firm downtown, and started learning how the real money moved. I kept my head down, saved everything, and never called home. At 25, I moved to Denver because the shale boom was exploding and the pay was better. I took a senior analyst role, then jumped to a hedge fund that specialized in oil futures. 2 years later, I started my own shop with 2 partners who believed in me more than my own blood ever had. We grew fast, stayed quiet, and 8 years in, we were managing over $1 billion in energy assets. People back in Houston probably assumed I was scraping by in some apartment somewhere. They never asked. I never told them I'd become the silent capital that kept half the rigs in the Permian running. I built everything they said I'd never have, brick by brick, without a single person from that dining table ever noticing. 6 months ago, I finally understood why I never fit. It started with a text from Riley that came in while I was in a board meeting. "Mason is using you as background decoration for his big night. Just warning you, don't let him play you." I stared at the message longer than I should have, then excused myself and walked to the window overlooking Larimer Square. Something about her words hit a nerve I'd ignored for years. That same week, I flew to Houston on a regular commercial flight. No jet, no attention, and used an old key Mom still hadn't changed to let myself into the River Oaks house while everyone was out. I wasn't there to steal anything. I only wanted to look through the safe in Dad's study one last time, something I'd thought about doing since I was a teenager. Inside a leather folder at the very back, I found a single handwritten letter dated 38 years earlier. The paper was thin, the ink faded, but the signature was clear. Nathan Brooks. He wrote to Mom from an oil camp in Alaska, thanking her for the short time they'd had together before he shipped out again, and promising to send money when he could. At the bottom, he asked about the baby. Me. I stood there in the dark study holding proof I'd never been Dennis Carson's son, and the only thing I felt was relief. 3 days later, I walked into an independent medical lab in downtown Denver, paid cash, and submitted samples under a fake name. 2 weeks after that, the sealed report arrived at a private mailbox. The conclusion was one line: 0% probability of paternity with Dennis Carson. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and read it 5 times. Instead of rage, I felt the last loose thread snap into place. Every cold dinner, every comparison to Mason, every time Dad looked through me instead of at me, finally made sense. I wasn't failing their expectations. I had simply never been part of the picture they were trying to force. Yet for 8 straight years I had kept funneling capital into Carson Brothers through a Delaware limited liability company, nested inside a blind trust that fed a private credit facility. My name never appeared on a single term sheet, never showed up in any investor update. Dad and Mason signed the loan documents thinking they were dealing with some anonymous East Coast fund that liked Texas infrastructure plays. I kept the money flowing for 3 reasons I could finally admit to myself. First, Mom had never been cruel, only silent, and I still felt something like duty toward her. Second, 3,000 employees in Houston and Dallas would lose their jobs overnight if the company folded, and I wasn't heartless enough to let that happen. Third, and maybe the strangest part I wanted to prove, I could save the empire that threw me away without any of them ever realizing who was holding the rope. I left the report in the glove box for months, telling myself I would decide what to do with it later. Riley's text changed that. Mason wanted to parade me around like the cautionary tale one last time, and something inside me decided later had arrived. Saturday night, the rooftop of the new Hotel Alessandra was packed. 400 guests in black tie filled every corner of the open-air space, the Houston skyline glittering behind them like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. The company had set up cameras everywhere because the whole event was streaming live on LinkedIn and the Carson Brothers YouTube channel. Waiters circled with trays of champagne and a string quartet played just loud enough to keep conversation flowing. I stood near the bar in the same tailored Tom Ford suit I'd worn to 3 closings that week, sipping club soda with lime. Mom spotted me first and gave a small wave, but Dad was busy shaking hands with a group of bankers. Mason hadn't acknowledged me once since I arrived. Then the lights dimmed slightly and the MC introduced the man of the hour. Mason walked onto the small stage in a midnight blue tux, flashing the smile that had landed him on the cover of Texas Monthly twice. He thanked the board, thanked the employees, thanked the city of Houston for believing in the next generation of Carson leadership. The crowd ate it up. When he reached the part about family, he paused for effect and turned directly toward me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a special mention to my brother Blake, he said, voice dripping with fake warmth, while his eyes stayed cold. He proved a long time ago that running away to Colorado is the best way to stay completely irrelevant. Let's give him a hand for showing us exactly what not to do. The laughter rolled across the rooftop like a wave. Phones came out instantly. People I didn't know filmed me for TikTok and Instagram stories, zooming in on my face to catch the humiliation. A few even clapped slower, waiting to see if I would react. I set my glass on the bar and started clapping too slow and deliberate, the sound carrying in the sudden pocket of quiet that followed Mason's joke. Then I reached into my inside pocket, pulled out my phone, and typed a single message to Owen. Execute red protocol. All positions. I hit send. 14 seconds later, the first phone buzzed. Then another. Within half a minute, a ripple moved through the crowd as partners and lenders checked their inboxes. 3 automated withdrawal notices had just gone out from the funds I controlled. $62 million in committed capital gone. The key man clauses and material adverse change provisions I had personally drafted 8 years earlier triggered instantly. Every major construction contract tied to that financing was now frozen pending new funding approval, which would take months if it happened at all. $1.2 billion in projects across Texas just hit a brick wall. Dad's phone exploded first. He stepped away from the banker's face, going pale under the string lights as he scrolled. Mason's went off right after, the smile freezing on his face while he tried to keep posing for the live stream cameras. The quartet stopped playing mid-note. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into open questions. Security staff in black suits appeared at the edges of the rooftop, scanning the crowd like something had gone very wrong. A local news producer who had been filming B-roll started barking orders into her headset. I kept my hands in my pockets and watched the exact moment Mason realized the laughter had turned on him. He looked straight at me across 50 feet of polished concrete, and for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. By Monday morning, the damage was irreversible. Bloomberg terminals across Texas lit up with the same headline before the market even opened: Carson Brothers loses major funding. Shares down 41% in pre-market trading. Local television stations ran breaking news banners while reporters stood outside the company headquarters on Post Oak Boulevard trying to get comment from anyone who would talk. Employees started texting each other in panic, wondering if payroll would clear that Friday. Wells Fargo, the lead lender on the revolving credit facility, wasted no time. At 8:17 a.m. Central, an email landed in Dad's inbox invoking the acceleration clause in the loan agreement. $180 million was now due immediately instead of over the next 4 years. The bank gave them 10 business days to cure or face foreclosure on every piece of equipment and real estate that carried the Carson name. Dad and Mason chartered the first available jet out of Houston Hobby and landed in Denver just after noon Mountain Time. They went straight to the Four Seasons downtown, the hotel where I keep a residential suite on the top floor. Security had strict instructions: no unscheduled visitors. The concierge called up twice to say 2 men were refusing to leave the lobby. I let them wait 40 minutes. When I finally told the desk to send them up, the elevator doors opened onto my private foyer and they walked in, looking like they hadn't slept. Dad's tie was loose, and his face had the gray color I remembered from the one time the company almost went under in 2008. Mason kept running his hand through his hair, eyes darting everywhere except at me. I didn't offer them a drink. I just turned the laptop on the marble counter so they could both see the screen. One folder held every commitment letter, every wire confirmation, every quarterly report for the past 8 years. The blind trust documents were there too, along with the Delaware LLC filings and the private credit facility agreements they had signed without ever realizing the money came from me. Dad scrolled slowly, breathing getting heavier with every page. Mason stopped at a transfer confirmation showing $62 million moving into the company account the same week they thought they had closed some miracle deal with an anonymous institutional investor. "You!" Mason finally whispered the word, barely making it out. I closed the laptop. Every dollar that kept the doors open when oil crashed, when COVID shut down job sites, when the banks laughed at your balance sheet. Every single one came from the brother you spent your whole life treating like a punchline. Dad tried to speak, cleared his throat twice, then managed a cracked sentence. "We can fix this. Whatever you want, name it. Just put the money back." I looked at him for a long moment and felt nothing. Not anger anymore. Not even satisfaction. Just the cold clarity of a decision I had already made months earlier. "No," I said. "The money is gone. The contracts are frozen. The banks are calling the loans. You built a company that only worked because I was willing to carry it. I'm not willing anymore." Mason took one step forward like he wanted to grab my arm, then thought better of it. "You're destroying everything we worked for. You destroyed the only thing I ever asked for a long time ago," I answered. "Consider this interest on a very old loan." I walked to the door and held it open. Security was waiting in the hallway to escort them back down. 1 week later, we sat in the conference room of my law firm on the 42nd floor. The Rocky Mountains filled the windows behind me, bright October sun pouring across the long walnut table. My attorney, Margaret Ellison, had already laid out 3 identical sets of documents. Dad and Mason took the chairs across from me without being asked. Neither had shaved. Neither looked like they had slept much since Denver. Margaret slid the first stack forward. "This is the final withdrawal instruction for the remaining committed capital," she said, in the calm voice she normally reserved for 9-figure closings. $62 million will move today into the Nathan Brooks Foundation, a fully compliant 501c3 registered in Colorado. Form 8283 has been filed with the IRS. Appraisals are attached, and the receiving charity has signed acknowledgement. The transfer is irrevocable. I picked up the pen and signed all 4 signature pages without hesitation. The sound of the ink was the only noise in the room. The second stack was thinner. "Petition for legal name change, District Court of Denver County," Margaret continued. "Blake Carson to Blake Brooks. Effective upon judge's signature, which was granted yesterday at 3:17 p.m. New passport, driver's license, and social security records are already processing." I signed again. Blake Brooks. The name I should have carried from the beginning. Dad's knuckles went white where he gripped the armrests. His lips moved like he was trying to form words, but nothing came out. Mason stared at the table, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Margaret gathered the signed originals, placed them in a leather folder, and nodded once at the door. 2 associates entered, notarized everything, and left just as quietly. I leaned back in my chair and finally spoke. "You stopped being my family the day you decided I never belonged," I said, looking first at Dad, then at Mason. "Today, I stopped being your safety net." Dad made a sound that was half cough, half sob, but he didn't stand up. Mason's eyes lifted to mine, red-rimmed and hollow. "There's nothing left to negotiate," I added. "The company will restructure, sell assets, or close. That's no longer my concern." I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked to the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. The elevator ride down took 30 seconds. When the doors opened to the street, the mountain air hit me clean and cold. I stepped onto 17th Street, turned left toward Union Station, and never looked back. Some doors aren't meant to be closed gently. Some just need to be locked forever.